Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., residents of Brookside Plaza witnessed the same impossible scene. A tiny 6-year-old girl walking 6 massive German shepherds through the city streets with the precision of a military commander. Some stopped to stare, others pulled out their phones, but no one truly understood what they were seeing. Whispers erupted everywhere. How is she controlling them? Where are her parents? Why do those dogs move like trained soldiers? But the little girl never explained. She just appeared every single morning, same time, same route, same quiet determination, until one day, a local bakery owner finally decided to follow her. And what she discovered broke the hearts of an entire city. What secret was this child carrying behind that innocent smile? Stay with us, because the truth will move you to tears. Where are you watching from? We like to know where our viewers are tuning in from. While you are here, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible true story. Hit the like button and let us know in the comments. What promise would you keep no matter what? We read every comment. The city was just beginning to stir when the rhythmic click of paws echoed across the cobblestones of Brookside Plaza. Dawn light painted the storefronts in soft amber, and early morning mist clung to the fountain at the plaza's center. Through that golden haze emerged a sight the neighborhood had witnessed dozens of times, yet could never quite make sense of. A little girl, barely past kindergarten age, walked confidently down the main walkway wearing a soft pink dress that seemed far too delicate for the responsibility she carried. Her hair was tied neatly in a bun, bouncing slightly with each step. But what stopped people in their tracks wasn't the dress. It was her companions. 6 full-grown German shepherds, their leashes wrapped around her small wrists, moved beside her in flawless formation. 3 on each side, their movements synchronized like a choreographed dance. No parent walked with her. No adult supervised from a distance. Every morning, 7 a.m. exactly, she materialized from the side streets, crossed through the plaza with purpose, and vanished down Riverside Avenue just as the church bells began to chime. Then, like clockwork, the streets would return to normal, as if she and her 6 guardians had simply dissolved into the morning air. Locals began weaving stories to explain her. Some believed she was the daughter of a fallen police dog trainer, continuing his legacy. Others whispered that the dogs belonged to a secret military unit and she was helping rehabilitate them. But no theory could explain how a child so young commanded such powerful animals with nothing more than a gentle tug or a soft whistle. The dogs themselves seemed to understand something the rest of the world didn't. They weren't just walking with her. They were protecting her. One crisp Tuesday morning, Mrs. Chen, who ran the flower shop on the corner, tried to offer the girl a daisy. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said warmly, extending the yellow bloom. But before Bree could respond, all 6 shepherds shifted position instantly. 2 stepped forward, foreclosed in around her sides, their eyes locked on Mrs. Chen with an intensity that made her hand freeze mid-air. The girl said nothing. She simply placed a tiny hand on the nearest dog's back, made a subtle gesture with her fingers, and the dogs relaxed and continued forward, leaving Mrs. Chen standing alone with the flower still in her trembling hand. Soon, videos of the mysterious morning walks flooded neighborhood social media groups. People called her the Dog Whisperer Princess. Some joked she was training the world's smallest K9 unit. But beneath the humor was something else, a growing sense of wonder mixed with concern. Because if you watched carefully, you'd notice things that didn't add up. The dogs weren't just obedient. They were tactical. Every few steps, one shepherd would glance over its shoulder. Another scanned the street ahead. When a delivery truck rumbled too close, their bodies tensed, forming a tighter protective barrier around the girl. And Bree, she never rushed, never stumbled, never showed fear. But she also never smiled. There was something in her eyes, something far too old for a 6-year-old. A quiet sadness. A weight she carried that no child should have to bear. Then one morning everything changed. Mara Ellison, owner of Corner Crust Bakery, was arranging fresh croissants in her window display when she noticed something she'd missed before. As Bree passed by with her pack, morning sunlight caught the side of one dog's vest, revealing deep scratch marks across the fabric. Another dog limped ever so slightly, an old injury that had mostly healed but hadn't quite disappeared. Mara's baker's instinct, honed from years of reading people through their daily routines, suddenly kicked in. This wasn't a child playing dress-up with pets. These were working dogs. Injured working dogs. And this little girl was caring for them alone. That morning, as Bree and her 6 companions rounded the corner toward Riverside Avenue, Mara grabbed her coat, flipped the sign on her bakery door to "back in 10 minutes," and stepped onto the street. She was going to follow the girl. And what she would discover in the next hour would unravel a story so heartbreaking, so unexpected, that it would bring an entire community to tears, and ultimately to action. Ethan Cole hadn't slept well in months. The kind of insomnia that comes from seeing too much, surviving what others didn't, and carrying memories that don't fade with morning light. So when dawn broke over Brookside Plaza, he was already on his 4th-floor balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. That's when he saw her again. The little girl in the pink dress, moving through the empty plaza with her 6 German shepherds. Most people found the sight charming, even amusing. Ethan found it troubling. Because unlike the flower shop lady or the smartphone-wielding locals, Ethan Cole knew what he was looking at. 10 years as a military dog handler in Afghanistan had trained his eyes to see things civilians missed. And what he saw in those 6 shepherds made his chest tighten. The way they moved wasn't coincidental. It was tactical. 3 dogs on the left flank, 3 on the right, maintaining perfect spacing. When the girl approached the fountain, 2 shepherds instinctively moved ahead to scout, while 1 stayed back to cover their rear. When a jogger passed too close, the formation tightened without the girl ever giving a visible command. These weren't family pets learning tricks. These were operators executing protocols. Ethan set his coffee down and leaned forward, squinting through the morning haze. As sunlight hit the dogs at just the right angle, he saw it clearly. Scarring along one shepherd's right shoulder, the kind left behind by debris impact or shrapnel. Another dog moved with a barely perceptible hitch in its gait, an old leg injury that had healed but would never fully disappear. His pulse quickened. He'd seen those exact scars before. On working dogs. Search and rescue units. Canines who'd been through hell and survived. But where was their handler? The girl couldn't be more than 6 years old. Children didn't train military-grade dogs. They didn't command disciplined formations or maintain operational awareness. Yet here she was, doing exactly that every single morning alone. Ethan's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Had someone trained her? Was she being exploited? Were these dogs stolen? The scenarios spiraled, but none of them made sense. Because the dogs weren't just obeying the girl, they were devoted to her. The way they positioned themselves, the constant visual checks, the protective intensity in their posture. This wasn't forced compliance. This was loyalty. He watched as Bree reached the edge of the plaza and gave a small hand signal, so subtle he almost missed it. Immediately, the dogs shifted into a tighter diamond formation for the street crossing. One shepherd glanced back, scanning for threats. Another's ears swiveled, tracking ambient sounds. When a delivery van rumbled past, their muscles coiled, ready to react, before relaxing again once the vehicle passed. Military precision. Trauma-informed caution. Battle-tested instincts. Ethan Cole had worked with K-9 units long enough to know one absolute truth. Dogs like these didn't bond this deeply with just anyone. They chose their handler. They trusted through experience, through survival, through shared purpose. Which meant this little girl wasn't just walking dogs. She was leading a team. The question that haunted Ethan as he watched them disappear down Riverside Avenue was the same one that would eventually shatter his assumptions and break his heart. What kind of tragedy creates a 6-year-old commander? Ethan didn't plan to follow her. He told himself he was just going for a morning walk, that the direction he chose, down Riverside Avenue, the exact path the girl had taken, was pure coincidence. But the truth was simpler and more urgent. Something about what he'd witnessed demanded answers. He kept his distance, staying a full block behind, using parked cars and storefronts for cover. Old habits from reconnaissance training kicked in automatically. The girl moved with surprising purpose for someone so young, never hesitating at intersections, never looking back. The dogs maintained their formation, adjusting seamlessly to the narrower sidewalks and clusters of early morning pedestrians. They turned onto Harrison Street, a quieter residential road lined with old brownstones and overhanging maples. Ethan quickened his pace slightly, not wanting to lose sight of them. That's when everything happened at once. A cyclist came barreling around the corner, head down, earbuds in, moving far too fast for the pedestrian-heavy morning route. He was on a collision course with the girl, maybe 3 seconds from impact, and showed no signs of slowing. Ethan's body tensed to sprint forward, but he was too far away. He didn't need to be. Before the cyclist could react, before Bree even turned her head, all 6 shepherds erupted into motion with a speed and precision that took Ethan's breath away. 2 dogs lunged forward, positioning themselves directly in the cyclist's path, forcing him to swerve hard. 3 more closed ranks around Bree, forming a living barrier between her and the street. The 6th shepherd, the one with the shoulder scar, moved behind her, nudging her backward with its body, creating additional distance from the threat. The cyclist wobbled, cursed, regained control, and sped off without even stopping to apologize. He probably didn't realize how close he'd come to a far worse outcome. Those dogs could have taken him down in half a heartbeat if they'd perceived him as a real threat rather than a reckless fool. But what stopped Ethan cold wasn't the defensive response. It was what happened next. Bree placed her small hand on the lead shepherd's head and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper but crystal clear in the morning quiet. "Easy, Bravo. Stand down. Formation 2. Bravo. Not good boy. Not a pet name. A tactical call sign." Immediately, the dogs shifted from aggressive defense into a new configuration. Tighter, more protective, 2 shepherds now scanning behind them while the others faced forward. It was a threat-assessed formation change, the kind of adjustment search and rescue teams made after encountering danger in unstable environments. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He'd given those same commands 100 times in Kandahar. He'd worked with K-9 units who responded to call signs, who understood formation protocols, who could shift from protection mode to reconnaissance mode with a single word. This wasn't a child playing pretend. This was operational. Bree continued walking, the dogs settling back into their original diamond pattern as the adrenaline faded from their systems. But now Ethan could see other details he'd missed from his balcony. The girl's posture wasn't just confident. It was trained. Her breathing had barely changed during the incident. She'd remained calm, centered, exactly as a handler should when her team executes under stress. Someone had taught her this. Someone had trained both her and these dogs to function as a unit. The question was no longer just about the dog's origins. It was about hers. Ethan watched from across the street as Bree and her 6 companions disappeared through a wrought iron gate attached to an old townhouse. The building looked forgotten by time, ivy crawling up cracked brick walls, paint peeling from window frames, a property that seemed abandoned except for the well-worn path leading to its side entrance. He waited 20 minutes, watching the windows for movement. Nothing. The girl and dogs had gone inside, but the house remained silent, as if swallowing them whole. Another 10 minutes passed. Then Bree emerged alone, her pink dress swapped for jeans and a backpack. A school day, Ethan realized. She was heading to class like any normal child, leaving her extraordinary secret behind locked doors. He knew what he was about to do crossed lines. Trespassing. Invasion of privacy. But the military part of his brain, the part trained to assess threats and protect the vulnerable, wouldn't let him walk away. If this child was in danger, if someone was exploiting her, he needed to know. The side gate wasn't locked. Careless, Ethan thought, unless the dogs themselves were considered security enough. He slipped through, moving quietly along the overgrown pathway toward a basement window he'd spotted earlier. It was cracked open slightly, probably for ventilation. Inside, the basement was nothing like the decrepit exterior suggested. It was clean, organized, purposeful. The far wall held industrial shelving stacked with supplies, medical kits, bags of premium dog food, water bowls arranged in precise rows. Training equipment hung from hooks. Harnesses, tactical vests, leashes in various lengths. But it was the crates along the opposite wall that made Ethan's breath catch. 6 heavy-duty crates, each one labeled with a name stencil painted in military block letters. Bravo, Atlas, Sierra, Duke, Ranger, Echo, and stamped on each crate door in faded official lettering, K-9 Unit Metropolitan Search and Rescue. Ethan moved closer, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the nearest crate. Inside were folded blankets, chew toys, and a laminated tag clipped to the door. He lifted it, reading the typed information. Bravo, German Shepherd, DOB, April 15, 2018 Handler. Officer Ryan Adams Specialty. Disaster Response/Rubble Search Status. Retired, Injury. Ryan Adams. Ethan committed the name to memory, then checked the other crates. Each dog had a similar tag. Each one listed the same handler. Each one marked as retired due to injury or trauma. These weren't stolen dogs or black market acquisitions. These were legitimate service animals, officially decommissioned, all connected to one person. On a makeshift desk in the corner, Ethan found a framed photograph partially obscured by training manuals. He picked it up and his chest tightened. The photo showed a young man in tactical gear, probably mid-20s, kneeling among 6 German shepherds. His smile was proud, his hand resting on Bravo's head. The dogs looked younger, healthier, their eyes bright with purpose. Written across the bottom in marker, Ryan and the squad best team ever. Beside the frame lay a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. Ethan unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the headline. Building Collapse Claims Life of Heroic K-9 Officer. The article was 2 years old. Officer Ryan Adams, 26, had died during a search and rescue operation when a partially collapsed warehouse gave way. He'd been attempting to extract trapped civilians when the secondary collapse occurred. 4 people were saved. Ryan didn't make it out. The article mentioned his K-9 team, 6 German shepherds trained specifically for disaster response. All 6 dogs survived but sustained various injuries. The unit was disbanded. The dogs retired from active service. But the article said nothing about what happened to the dogs after retirement, or about the little girl in the pink dress who now commanded them with the precision of a trained handler. Ethan's hands shook as he set the clipping down. A horrifying possibility began forming in his mind, one that explained everything: the tactical precision, the call signs, the protective devotion, the weight in that child's eyes. Ryan Adams had family, and somehow his legacy had passed to someone far too young to carry it. Ethan barely had time to process what he'd discovered when he heard the vehicles pull up outside. 2 white vans with official city seals. Animal control. His stomach dropped. He moved quickly to the basement window, watching as 4 officers in dark uniforms emerged, clipboards in hand, their expressions a mix of determination and bureaucratic indifference. One of them carried a catchpole. Another had a tranquilizer gun holstered at his hip. They weren't here for a welfare check. They were here to seize the dogs. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to leave, to get out before they found him trespassing, but something held him frozen in place. Some instinct that told him this was about to go very wrong. The officers approached the front door. Knocked. Waited. Knocked again, louder this time. Then came the sound that made Ethan's blood run cold. The deep, unified growl of 6 German shepherds sensing a threat to their home. The door swung open. Bree stood there in her school clothes, backpack still on her shoulders. She must have come home early. Behind her, all 6 dogs had materialized like shadows, forming their now familiar protective formation. "Are you the resident of this property?" the lead officer asked, his tone already skeptical as he looked down at the small girl. "This is my home," Bree said quietly. Her voice didn't waver, but Ethan could see her hands trembling. "We've received multiple reports about a minor living alone with 6 large, potentially dangerous animals. We're here to conduct an assessment and remove the dogs for." "They're not dangerous." Bree's voice rose slightly, her small frame positioning itself more firmly in the doorway. "They're retired service dogs. They have papers. They're registered. Miss, we understand you may have formed an attachment, but these animals require professional care. A child your age cannot." "I am their handler." The words came out with surprising force. "My brother trained them. They're mine now." The officer exchanged glances with his colleagues. One of them stepped forward, extending a hand as if to move past Bree into the house. It was a mistake. Bravo moved first, stepping between the officer and the girl with a low warning growl that vibrated through his chest. Within seconds, all 6 dogs had shifted into defensive positions, not attacking, but making their intentions absolutely clear. This was their line. No one crossed it. The officer with the tranquilizer gun reached for his holster. "Ma'am, you need to control these animals or we'll be forced to." "No." Bree's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face now. "Please, you can't take them. They're all I have left. They're my family." The raw desperation in her voice cut through Ethan like a blade. This wasn't a child throwing a tantrum. This was someone fighting to protect the last pieces of a shattered world. The lead officer's expression softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "Look, sweetheart, I understand this is hard. But you're a minor living in unsafe conditions with animals you can't properly care for. We're going to need to contact child services. They'll sort this out properly." "My mom takes care of us," Bree said, her voice barely a whisper now. "She works night shifts. She knows about the dogs. We're doing everything right. Please don't take them. We'll need to speak with your mother." And in the meantime, he pulled out an official notice from his clipboard. "This is a 48-hour warning. If conditions don't improve and proper guardianship isn't established, we'll return with the authority to remove these animals and potentially place you in temporary protective custody." He set the paper down on the doorstep. Bree didn't move to take it. The officers retreated to their vans, casting wary glances at the dogs still holding formation in the doorway. As the vehicles pulled away, Bree crumpled to her knees, her arms wrapping around Bravo's neck as sobs racked her small body. The 5 other dogs closed in around her, forming a protective circle, their heads lowered, their bodies pressed close. Not as soldiers, as family. And Ethan Cole, watching from the shadows of the basement, knew exactly what he had to do. The storm arrived without warning, the way autumn storms sometimes do in the city. Violent and sudden, as if the sky had been holding its breath and finally let go. Rain hammered against windows. Wind tore at tree branches. Thunder rolled through the streets like artillery fire. Ethan sat in his apartment, staring at the newspaper clipping he'd photographed on his phone earlier. Ryan Adams' face looked back at him, young and hopeful, surrounded by his team. He'd spent the last 2 hours searching for information about the family, about what happened after Ryan's death, about how a 6-year-old ended up as the sole caretaker of 6 retired K-9 units. The answers he found painted a devastating picture. Ryan's mother worked double shifts at the hospital to keep their home. His father had passed years earlier, and his little sister, Bree Adams, had been only 4 when her brother died saving strangers from a collapsed building. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating Ethan's balcony in stark white. His mind drifted to the townhouse, that old neglected structure with its cracked walls and peeling paint. The kind of building that looked picturesque in sunshine but dangerous in weather like this. Another crack of thunder. Then, cutting through the storm's roar, a sound that made his heart stop, the splintering crash of breaking wood, carried on the wind from somewhere down the street. Ethan was out the door before conscious thought caught up with instinct. He ran through sheets of rain, his shoes splashing through rapidly forming puddles. The storm had turned Riverside Avenue into a gray tunnel of water and wind. When he reached the townhouse, his worst fears materialized before him. Part of the roof had collapsed. Not completely, but enough. A section of rotted timber and old shingles had given way, punching through into what looked like the upper floor. Rain poured through the gap like a waterfall. The front door was locked. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice, and on the third impact the old wood frame splintered. He stumbled inside, immediately hit by the sound of water streaming through broken ceiling, of dogs barking in distress, of a small voice trying desperately to stay calm. It's okay," Bree was saying, her voice tight with fear. "Stay together. Formation 3. We're fine. We're fine." Ethan followed the sound to the basement stairs. Water was cascading down them, turning the steps into a treacherous rapids. He descended carefully, gripping the railing. The basement was flooding. Already 3 inches of water covered the floor, and more poured in from the ceiling breach above. The 6 dogs were huddled in the driest corner, standing on their crates to stay above the rising water. And in the middle of them, soaked to the bone and shivering violently, was Bree. She was trying to cover the dogs with blankets, trying to keep them warm while she herself was freezing. Her lips had a bluish tint. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the fabric. "No," Ethan said firmly, striding through the water toward her. Absolutely not. Bree's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. Who are you? Get away from. My name is Ethan Cole. I was a K9 handler. I know who these dogs are, and I know who your brother was. He knelt down to her level, ignoring the cold water soaking through his jeans. And right now, I know that Ryan would never forgive me if I let his little sister freeze to death trying to protect his team. The dogs watched him warily, but they didn't attack. Something in his tone, his posture, his familiarity with their world made them hesitate. They'll take them away, Bree whispered through chattering teeth. If I leave them, they'll come back and take them away. Then we take them with us, Ethan said simply. All of you. Right now. Another section of ceiling groaned ominously above them. Ethan stood, extending his hand to the freezing little girl who'd been carrying a burden no child should bear. Bree, he said gently, your brother trained you well. But even the best handlers know when to call for backup. Let me help. For a moment, she just stared at his outstretched hand. Then, finally, she took it. Ethan's apartment had never felt smaller. 6 massive German shepherds occupied every available floor space, their wet for steaming slightly in the warmth. They'd settled quickly once Bree gave them the command, forming a protective circle around the couch where she now sat wrapped in 3 blankets, a mug of hot chocolate cradled in her small hands. Her mother had been called. She was racing home from her hospital shift, panicked and grateful in equal measure. Ethan had assured her that Bree was safe, that the dogs were secure, that everything could wait until she arrived. But in the 30 minutes since they'd escaped the flooding townhouse, questions had multiplied in his mind faster than he could process them. While Bree dozed fitfully on the couch, exhaustion finally claiming her, Ethan salvaged what he could from the waterproof bag she'd been clutching throughout the rescue. Documents, photos, training logs, the physical archive of her brother's life and career. He spread them carefully on his kitchen table, using towels to dry the damp edges. Most were routine, service records, commendations, training certifications. Ryan Adams had been exemplary, dedicated, the kind of officer who volunteered for the most dangerous assignments because he believed it was his duty. But one photograph made Ethan pause, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't the squad photo he'd seen in the basement. This one was older, more personal. Ryan stood in full ceremonial uniform at what looked like a memorial service, holding the folded American flag. Beside him stood another man in tactical gear, his arm around Ryan's shoulders in solidarity. The caption written on the back read, Ryan and Daniel, Brothers in Service, Memorial Day 2019. Daniel. The name triggered something in Ethan's memory. He pulled out his phone and searched. Daniel Carter K-9 officer. The results loaded, and Ethan's hands went still. Officer Daniel Carter. Killed in action 3 years ago during a standoff at a domestic violence scene. He'd taken a bullet protecting civilians. Left behind a wife and a 4-year-old daughter. Left behind his K9 partner, a German shepherd named Bravo. Ethan's eyes snapped to the lead dog resting near Bree's couch. Bravo. The one with the shoulder scar. The one who always positioned himself closest to her. Who responded to her commands with absolute precision. The timeline crystallized in Ethan's mind like ice forming on glass. Daniel Carter dies. His partner Bravo retires, traumatized. Ryan Adams, Daniel's best friend and fellow handler, adopts Bravo, trains with him, rebuilds his trust. Then Ryan forms his own K9 unit, bringing in 5 more shepherds, creating the team that would eventually save lives in that warehouse collapse. But Ryan doesn't survive. The unit is disbanded. The dogs are retired, injured, traumatized, with nowhere to go. Except to Ryan's little sister. The girl who'd watched her brother train these dogs. Who'd learned the commands by osmosis, absorbed the protocols through repetition. Who'd promised, must have promised, to take care of them if anything ever happened. A 4-year-old girl loses her father. 2 years later, she loses her brother. And inherits not just his dogs, but his fallen friend's dog too. 6 living connections to the 2 men who'd defined her short life. No wonder she walked them every morning with such purpose. No wonder she commanded them with such precision. No wonder she'd rather freeze than let them be taken away. These weren't just dogs to Bree Adams. They were memory made flesh. They were love that survived death. They were the last pieces of her father and brother that still breathed, still moved, still protected her the way those men no longer could. Ethan looked at the sleeping child on his couch, at the 6 dogs arranged around her like sentinels, and felt something break open in his chest. She wasn't just Ryan Adams' sister. She was Daniel Carter's daughter. And she'd been carrying the weight of 2 legacies, 2 losses, 2 impossible promises, all alone. The police arrived at dawn, accompanied by animal control and a child services representative. The 48-hour warning had expired, and bureaucracy moved forward with its usual indifferent momentum. They expected to find chaos, a child in over her head, animals living in squalor, evidence of neglect or worse. What they found instead stopped them at the threshold. Ethan had spent the night organizing. Bree's mother, Sarah Adams, exhausted from her hospital shift but fierce with protective maternal energy, had arrived hours earlier. Together, they'd returned to the townhouse with Bree and the dogs, armed with industrial fans, tarps, and determination. The storm damage was contained. The basement was pumped dry. And in the morning light, with the rain finally stopped, the sanctuary revealed itself for what it truly was. Captain Miranda Hayes of the Metropolitan Police led the inspection team. She was prepared to execute a removal order. Instead, she found herself standing in a meticulously maintained care facility that would have impressed professional kennels. The basement walls were lined with medical charts, one for each dog, documenting vaccinations, medication schedules, dietary needs, exercise routines. Every chart was current, signed off by a licensed veterinarian whose contact information was prominently displayed. Appointment receipts were filed in chronological order, showing regular checkups dating back 2 years. The K9 crates weren't cages. They were personal spaces, each one equipped with orthopedic bedding, familiar toys, and emotional support items recommended for dogs with PTSD. Training equipment hung organized by type and purpose. Food was stored in airtight containers, portioned precisely according to each dog's nutritional requirements. But it was the far wall that made Captain Hayes' professional detachment crumble. A memorial, carefully constructed with the reverence of a chapel. 2 photographs in matching frames. Officer Daniel Carter in dress uniform, and Officer Ryan Adams in tactical gear, both surrounded by commendations, medals, and folded flags. Between them, a handwritten letter in a child's careful script. Dear Daddy and Ryan, I'm taking good care of your team. Bravo still misses you, but he's getting better. Atlas learned a new command. Sierra's leg doesn't hurt anymore. Duke, Ranger, and Echo are brave every day. I promise I won't let anyone forget what you did. I promise they'll always have a home. Love, Bree. Beneath the letter, training logs documented every session, every milestone, every behavioral improvement. Bree had been tracking their recovery with the precision of a professional handler, because she'd been taught by the best. "Captain," one of the officers called from across the room. He was holding a binder labeled Sanctuary Operations Manual. Inside were detailed protocols, emergency procedures, behavioral assessment guidelines, community outreach plans. Sarah Adams' signature appeared on every page as supervising guardian. This wasn't a child hoarding animals. This was a functioning sanctuary operated by a family honoring their fallen heroes. Captain Hayes turned to where Bree stood holding her mother's hand, her small frame rigid with fear and defiant hope. The 6 dogs sat in formation behind her, not aggressive but present, protecting, being protected. "Mrs. Adams," Captain Hayes said slowly, her voice careful, "how long have you been maintaining this operation?" "Since my son died," Sarah replied, her chin raised. Ryan made Bree promise to care for his team. These dogs were going to be separated, sent to different facilities, maybe even euthanized due to their trauma. We couldn't let that happen. So we didn't. A 6-year-old child walking 6 large dogs unsupervised. "She's never unsupervised," Sarah interrupted. "I work nights so I can be here during the day. Our neighbors know to watch for her. And those dogs would die before they let anything happen to her. The law requires." "The law fails these animals every day," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "These dogs served this city. They saved lives. And when they were broken and traumatized, the system threw them away. We gave them a second chance. We gave them family." Captain Hayes looked at the memorial wall again, at the medical charts, at the little girl who'd somehow become the keeper of 2 men's legacies. Then she turned to the animal control officers and did something that surprised everyone, including herself. "Close the file," she said quietly. "This isn't a violation. This is a sanctuary." Later that afternoon, after the officials had left and the tension had finally drained from the townhouse, Ethan found Bree in the basement. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, Bravo's massive head resting in her lap while the other 5 dogs dozed around her in a protective circle. The storm damage had been mostly repaired, but evidence of the chaos remained: damp patches on the concrete, a blue tarp covering the ceiling breach. "Your mom said you wanted to talk to me," Ethan said gently, settling onto an overturned crate a respectful distance away. Bree nodded, her small fingers absently stroking Bravo's ear. The dog's eyes were half closed in contentment, completely at peace. For a long moment she didn't speak, and Ethan didn't push. He'd learned in his military years that some stories needed their own time to emerge. "I was 4 when my daddy died," she finally said, her voice so quiet he had to lean forward to hear. "I don't remember a lot about him. Not his voice, really. Not the way he smelled. But I remember the last thing he said to me." She looked up at Ethan, and in her eyes he saw that same haunted weight he'd noticed from his balcony weeks ago. The burden of memory too heavy for such young shoulders. He came home in his uniform one night. It was late, but he woke me up. He wasn't supposed to, but he did. Mommy was already asleep. He sat on my bed and told me he had to go somewhere dangerous. That Bravo was going with him. Her hand stilled on the dog's head. Bravo was his partner. His best friend. Bravo shifted slightly at the sound of his name, pressing closer to the girl. Daddy said, "Bree, if something happens to me, I need you to make me a promise. Take care of Bravo. He's going to be sad without me, but he'll be brave for you. And you be brave for him." I didn't really understand what he meant. I said okay because he looked so serious. Then he kissed my forehead and left. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. 2 days later, Mommy told me Daddy wasn't coming home. That he'd saved people but got hurt doing it. They gave us his flag and his medal and told us he was a hero. But all I could think about was Bravo. About my promise. Ryan took him in, Ethan said softly, understanding flooding through him. Bree nodded. Uncle Ryan, that's what I called him even though he was my brother. He was so much older, almost like a second dad. He saw how sad Bravo was. How the police were going to retire him because he couldn't work anymore without Daddy. So Ryan adopted him. Started training him again gentle-like. Made him part of his new team. She gestured to the other 5 dogs. These guys all had problems too. Sierra was scared of loud noises. Atlas had nightmares. Duke wouldn't eat. Ryan saved all of them. Taught them to trust again. Taught them to be a family. And then Ryan. Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. The building collapsed, Bree whispered. He saved 4 people. But the roof came down. The dogs all got hurt trying to dig him out. They found him, but it was too late. Her voice cracked, but she pushed forward with fierce determination. Before the funeral, I went to see the dogs at the police kennel. They were all there, hurt and confused and grieving. And Bravo looked at me with these eyes like he was asking me to keep the promise. Not just for Daddy anymore. For Ryan too. She looked at Ethan directly now, tears streaming freely. I'm only 6. I know I'm little. I know people think I can't do this. But I promised my daddy I'd take care of his team. And Ryan's team is Daddy's team. So I have to keep my promise. Even if it's hard. Even if people don't understand. Ethan felt his own eyes burning. Bree, your father would be so proud of you. And so would Ryan. You really think so? I know so, he said firmly. Because you kept your promise. Against impossible odds, you kept it. 3 days after the storm, Bree's body finally surrendered to the weight she'd been carrying. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the flood, the inspection, the emotional confession, all of it drained away at once. She collapsed during breakfast, her small frame crumpling like paper as her mother screamed her name. The hospital diagnosed severe exhaustion, dehydration, and stress-induced fever. Her body had been operating beyond its limits for so long that it simply shut down when safety finally allowed it to. The doctor said she'd been running on nothing but determination and love for weeks, maybe months. She slept for nearly 20 hours straight. When she finally woke, the hospital room was filled with flowers. Cards covered every available surface. But what caught her attention immediately was Ethan sitting in the chair beside her bed, and behind him, standing in the doorway with special permission from hospital administration, was Bravo. The massive German shepherd's tail wagged slowly when he saw her eyes open. A nurse had bent several rules to allow him inside, but Captain Hayes had made a single phone call that changed everything. Sometimes heroes earned special privileges. "Hey, little warrior," Ethan said softly. "Welcome back." "Bravo." Bree's voice was hoarse, but her face lit up with joy. The dog padded forward carefully, placing his head on the edge of her bed where she could reach him. "He's been waiting," Ethan explained. "They all have. Your mom's taking care of the others, but this guy refused to settle until he saw you." Over the next week, as Bree recovered, the story spread through the city like wildfire. Local news picked it up first. The little girl who'd kept a promise to her fallen father and brother, who'd single-handedly operated a sanctuary for traumatized K-9 veterans, who'd walk those dogs every morning not for show but for their healing and hers. The community response was overwhelming. Donations poured in for the sanctuary. Volunteer handlers offered their time. A local contractor pledged to repair and renovate the townhouse completely, free of charge. The veterinarian who'd been quietly providing care at reduced rates was offered a city grant to continue his work. But it was the ceremony 2 weeks later that brought everything full circle. The hospital discharged Bree on a sunny Saturday morning. Her mother wheeled her out to the plaza, the same Brookside Plaza where she'd walked her dogs every morning at 7 a.m. sharp. Except this time, hundreds of people lined the streets. News cameras, officials, neighbors who'd watched her mysterious walks, the shopkeeper who'd tried to give her a flower, the cyclist who'd nearly hit her. And at the center of it all stood Chief of Police Thomas Rivera, flanked by Captain Hayes and an honor guard in full ceremonial uniform. Bree's 6 dogs sat in perfect formation behind her wheelchair, their service vests freshly cleaned, their eyes alert and proud. Ethan stood beside them in his old military dress uniform, serving as their handler for the ceremony. Chief Rivera knelt to Bree's level, his weathered face gentle with emotion. In his hands was a velvet box containing a medal, gold and gleaming in the sunlight. "Bree Adams," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "On behalf of the Metropolitan Police Department and this grateful city, I present you with the Civilian Medal of Courage. Your dedication, compassion, and unwavering commitment to protecting those who once protected us represents the highest ideals of service." He pinned the medal to her dress, then did something unprecedented. He stood, faced the 6 dogs and saluted them. "And to Bravo, Atlas, Sierra, Duke, Ranger, and Echo retired officers of the K-9 unit, we honor your service and welcome you home." The crowd erupted. Not just applause but tears. Grown men wiping their eyes. Women openly sobbing. The sound of hundreds of people finally understanding what they'd been witnessing all along. Not a mysterious little girl walking dogs, but a keeper of promises. A guardian of legacies. A 6-year-old hero making sure that sacrifice was never forgotten. Bree looked at her mother, at Ethan, at her 6 dogs, and finally at the medal on her chest. Then she did something she hadn't done in public in 2 years. She smiled. A real smile. Bright and genuine and free. Because she'd kept her promise. And the whole city was helping her keep it now. If Bree's story of courage, loyalty, and keeping impossible promises touched your heart, don't let this be the last inspiring story you hear. Subscribe to our channel right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. These are the stories that remind us what truly matters: love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that define us. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes come in all sizes. What promise would you fight to keep? Tell us in the comments below.